Hi guys, welcome to the next video on the chapter Making of a Global World. Now, in the previous video we discussed about the correlation between Indian trade and colonialism. In this video we'll be discussing about the economy during the First World War. So, even though the First World War was primarily fought in Europe, the impact was seen all over the world. So, the 20th century first half of that was plunged into crisis that took more than 3 decades to overcome. So this was a unique situation. This was the first time the entire world had seen a war at a stage that actually impacted for more than 3 decades. So the war, just a few facts about that. The war was fought between two power blocks, the Allies and the Central Powers. Allies being Britain, France and Russia, and again US joined it very late. But the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary and Ottoman Turkey. So these were the various blocks that fought, and this was the first modern industrial war. So modern weapons were used, machine guns, tanks, aircrafts, chemical weapons, and millions of soldiers fought this war. So millions of soldiers were recruited from all around the world and moved to the front line. So even though India had nothing to do with it, a large amount of Indian soldiers were actually recruited to fight this world war. So industries were also restructured to produce war-related goods. So uniforms, the food grains for them, or machine guns, so any utility just for the war. So the industries were restructured in such a way. Then, what was the various impacts of that? So you could see in death and destruction as well. Around 9 million people were dead and 20 million were injured. So all these were the young soldiers who were able-bodied. So this could have been a massive workforce for this actually economies, and hence because a lot of workforce was lost, household income declined because of this. So the societies had to be reorganized because the men who had lost their lives or had become disabled, the women in those families took up jobs that men were expected to do because the workforce had been disabled or in some places lost. So this led to a sapping of the economic links between the largest economies because they had plunged into a deep war, and US on the other hand became an international creditor because it was the one who supported Britain through large sums of money from the US banks and the US public, because the Britain had to finance this huge war that they fought for 5 years. So what happened to Britain because of this is that it lost its earlier place of industrial dominance because US had become the chief dominant factor in the world then. So Britain was preoccupied with war. So other industries developed in India and Japan and captured Britain's international market share. So when Britain was distracted, the industries were restructured. Then in India and Japan, these industries were captured in the international market by the industries in India and Japan. And Britain had also fallen into a huge debt because they had taken extensively from the US during the war. Also, there was loss of employment. When the war ended, all those people had to lose their jobs in Britain because there was a decrease in demand. During war period, demand is high because the government wants it, then the demand decreases and the production also decreases. So a lot of people lost their jobs in the industries. So in 1921, 1 in every 5 British workers was unemployed. So this is a huge statistics. Almost 20% people were unemployed in Britain. So this was the situation for the Britain's situation in the global economic scenario. Then if you take the agricultural economies, then you would see the example of wheat producers. Let's say before the war, Eastern Europe was a major supplier of wheat before the war. So they used to provide a lot of wheat. Then during war, they were under crisis. Europe was under a huge war. Hence, they could not provide the supply for wheat. Hence, other countries such as Canada, America and Australia, they expanded their wheat production to support the deficit of the wheat provided by Eastern Europe. And when the war ended, again production in Eastern Europe revived. But these did not stop. They had actually expanded their production. Hence, there was an excess of production now, because these productions were joined by the Eastern Europe production, and hence this created a glut in the market, means excess in the market. And hence, since there is an excess of a product, the prices of that product falls. So when the prices of the products fall, the rural incomes declined and the farmers fell into deeper debt. So this was a huge situation, or a huge problem for European countries, and in fact a lot of other countries as well, but primarily dominated by the impact of the World War on the world economy. So this is what about the economies that was there during the First World War. In the next video, we'll be discussing the post-World War production and consumption. Thank you so much.